Artnerds, I'm back at you with another alcohol marker tutorial. Today we are coloring Naomi from my comic 7-inch Kara on Strathmore tone tan paper using Copic markers. The colors we're going to be using today come from some of my other videos where I talk about hair and skin tones, and you guys can find links to those in the description below. But we're using E17, E27, E49, W9, E04, R39, E59, B000, B60, B32, V28, BV25, Y18, Y26, B21, B23, YG00, YG01, YG03, YG63, YG67, YG97, BG07, B18, E70, E49, W9, and 110. And we are doing another lineless marker tutorial. So this illustration of Naomi was already sketched in my sketchbook using a red Pentel lead. So I begin with B21, adding shadow to the tops of her eyes and coloring in her dress and her necklace. And then, I used B000 for the tops of her eyes and her necklace. I used B32 and B60, starting with B60 and then moving into B32 for her dress and to add shadows. Now I am adding an underlayer of toning blush to her face using E04, and I know that looks really ridiculous right now, but with darker skin tones I've found that it's really helpful to apply the blush and to apply some of the shadow first and then apply your darker skin tones on top of that, because it allows you to use lighter colors for blush if you wish and build them up. If you were to apply these lighter colors on top of your darker skin tones, those lighter colors would push the skin tones back and they kind of desaturate them. So I found that this method works really well when coloring darker skin tones. So for her eyes, I started with YG00, moved in on to YG01 and YG03, and then added YG63, YG67, and BG07. Once I did that, I'm adding another layer on the inside of her sleeves. And I'm starting the base color for her skin, and I'm using E17 as the base for her skin. And something that's really nice about these tone tan papers is that normally I would have to do a couple of layers of E17 for Naomi because you're fighting against the very stark white of the paper. But with tone papers, you already have this really nice base tone to work from, and it makes it so much easier to actually build up darker skin tones. So if you are rendering darker skin tone characters, or if you're doing portraits of people with darker skin tones, starting with a warm like desert rose or tone tan or just any of those tone papers can be a really great base for your art. And I'm blending out the E17 just a little bit to kind of ease the transition between the tone tan of the paper and Naomi's skin. And now I'm going in with another layer of E17, just kind of building that color up, filling in more of her skin, kind of getting a feel for this paper. Because believe it or not, I have not done too many portraits of Naomi on this kind of paper, but I think that's going to change in the near future because I really love how this piece turned out. And if you're wondering where Naomi is from, she is from my webcomic, 7-inch Kara. You guys can read the first volume in print. You can request it at your local library. You can pick it up from my shop. Or you can read it for free, the first volume, at 7inchkara.com or 7inchkara.tumblr.com. So after I finished with E27, I apply a layer of E27 and blend that back out with E17. And tone tan drawing paper takes markers quite nicely. You just need to be aware that if you don't put a blotter sheet in between, it will bleed through. So now I'm re-establishing the blush that we already put in with R39. And I'm coloring in her little pendant. I started with Y18 and then I added Y26. And I'm adding a little bit darker shadow with BV25. With lighter skin tones, you can probably apply the blush in the shadows first. I just haven't really tried it that way, but that's definitely something I could explore in the future. Now, I've mentioned in some of my other tutorials that I like to work from light to dark, from large areas to small areas. So what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of establishing Naomi on the page, and by doing that, I'm putting a little bit of shadow behind her, and I'm using B000 to do that. I'm also coloring in the daisies in her hair. This is meant to be a companion piece of an illustration I did of Kara, and I have a tutorial for that here on this channel as well, and I will link that in the cards and in the description. So I am starting in on her curls, and I'm using kind of a bouncy, springy movement to capture her curly hair, and I'm using E70 to start with that. Now I'm going back into her sleeves, adding another layer of B32, just kind of trying to get the insides of the sleeves more in shadow and a little bit darker. Now I'm going into her hair again with E49, and I ended up finding that my marker was a little bit dry and that the brush nib itself was getting a little bit gunky. And what I did is I just clean the brush off using some rubbing alcohol, and then I did a little filling from the brush end, and that kind of solved my problem. And I'm blending back out with E70, and I'm just doing that to soften the highlights on some of her curls. And it takes a little while because Naomi has a lot of hair. But you can see I'm doing kind of a springing motion, and I'm trying to leave lots of room for highlights. Going back in again with the E70. And then doing another layer with E49. Now on white paper, you can usually get about 3 tones of color per marker. I found that on toned and colored papers you can get about 2. And then I go in and add W9, continuing to build up shadow. And 110 for the darkest parts of the shadow, and to really try and pull more delineation into her hair. That would be my only complaint about using toned tan paper for Naomi, is that it does start to lose its contrast. And adding a little bit more of the B000 to establish shadow. And inking. And what I really like about the lineless marker technique, and there's a few things I really like, but one of the things I really like is that you only have to ink the areas that you feel need more contrast or need more definition, and that's usually the eyes are a big one. Adding more definition back into the mouth is another big one. You can also go back into the hair and ink some of the curls in her hair so those stand out a little bit more, and you can put in a little bit more depth. And I apologize for those of you who are motion sensitive or suffer from motion sickness. Generally, I will try to keep the piece still while I'm inking it, but I do find that rotating the piece so that you can get the best angle for your wrist is the most beneficial. And since I really like how this piece turned out, I opted to turn it because I wanted to do the best job that I could. But often I do try to reduce how much I turn the piece, just because I know that some of you guys are really sensitive to that. I myself am sensitive to that. And when you do it in time lapse, it gets really, really a bit much. So I am inking this with a Sakura of America Pigma FB and a Sakura of America Pigma MB. Now these are alcohol proof and waterproof brush pens. I really like them. You could ink your piece with these first and then marker on top of them, but I explained why I like the quote-unquote lineless style and why I like using the style. And my nose keeps sneaking into the bottom. Oh, I have such a big honker. I'm so sorry. That's also because I'm trying to get on top of it so I can see what I'm doing, and often the camera is in between my head and the paper. So I am using a white Winsor & Newton pigment marker. I only like the white blender, and I like it because you can use it with alcohol markers to kind of add some white back into the piece, and it's particularly nice on these toned papers. And now I'm using one of those opaque white Recollections markers just to add some opacity, some opaque white dots to add the shinies to her eyes. You can also use a white pit pen, and then I'm using a white Unisigno just to kind of add some of the final white details to this piece. Okay, so we are all finished. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys found this helpful, useful, and informative. If you like what I do and you want to help me do it, you can join me on Patreon at patreon.com/nettosoup. And make sure that you guys hit subscribe so you never miss another video. I have loads more alcohol marker tutorials coming up in the near future. So thank you guys so much. Bye, guys.